Welcome back to the Festival of Place, the Pineapples, in association with the Design Council. This is a unique event where we bring together developers, designers and placemakers from across the built environment to share their work as they vie to win a Golden Pineapple for Place. This is the third session of Activation, a category of projects vying for a Golden Pineapple for an initiative to bring people together and draw them to places. We have 6 projects shortlisted for activation, and each team will have just 10 minutes to present. Our judges will then have 10 minutes to ask questions, and to keep it fair, I'll be kind of informing them when they have 1 minute to go. You'll meet the judges in a moment, but I'll take a moment to just introduce them now. So first up, we've got Will Sandy, who's the founding director of Will Sandy Design Studio, a landscape designer who believes that through a careful engagement with multiple stakeholders, the gap can be bridged between clients, government, and community. Then we have Pamela Smith, who's a senior national consultant for Garden and Parks with National Trust, a horticulturalist with experience in public parks, botanic and historic gardens, who leads on presentation, garden history, interpretation, and new design. And then finally, we have Hani Salih, who's the co-founder of Migrant's Bureau, whose interest sits at the intersection of art, architecture, policy, economics, international development, and urbanism. Migrant's Bureau is a multidisciplinary social design and urbanism practice, facilitating sustainable design interventions, research, and community workshops for migrant communities. So thanks to our dedicated judges who've been kind of visiting all of these projects today. So without further ado, I'm going to get us started on our first project of this session. We're going to look at Sayre Street and the Meadow in Southwark, presented by Rada Wall-Pring from Lendlease and Gareth Marriott from Kattein Architects. The Meadow is a playable landscape that links to Sayre Street, a contemporary reinterpretation of a modern high street. So take it away, guys. You've got 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Laura, and pleasure to meet you, everybody. So, as Laura mentioned, my name is Rada Wall-Pring. I'm from Lendlease. Next to me is Gareth Marriott from Kattein Architects. We're so thrilled to be here today, and thank you so much. It's a fantastic opportunity for us to present in this category. So, I'm just going to share my slides and make sure everything works well. There we are. Hopefully, everybody will be able to see them now. Great. Without any further ado, what we'll do is we will crack on with Gareth starting with basically taking us through a bit of the context and implementation, and then I will wrap up with the impact these projects have actually created for Elephant and Castle. And again, what we were really hoping for is that you will get a little bit of the vibe of the area, since we're sitting right in the middle of Sayre Street. So without anything more, Gareth, over to you.
Thanks, Rada. Hi, everyone. So this project really began with Lendlease coming with us with a challenge to design half a temporary high street. We're sitting right at the heart of Elephant and Castle, one of the biggest, regeneration projects that's going on in London at the moment. And Sayre Street in the Meadow is really, the starting point of that civic heart to the space that's coming. So it takes the form of a half a high street and a key pedestrian green link. But within that, there's a collection of spaces, an ecology of spaces that's animated by people, animated by events, as the weather changes, as the seasons change. And that was really the starting point for this project. So here we are, just you can see on the master plan, we're basically 2 sides of a new residential block that's just gone up. And then to the west of us is a site that's currently under development for the next 4 or 5 years. So the intervention it's really sort of 2 interventions that come together here: a linear folly, which we'll talk about in a second, and a wildflower meadow that provides a more generous area of public realm to explore. Really, the main driving force behind this project was supporting local independent food traders that are coming in here. So, 4 of these traders were part of a previous Meanwhile project, Artworks, where they were just in a shipping container, and now they're part of the permanent public realm in Sayre Street, spilling out and things. So it was really step up. So that business sustainability and ecology was a key thing that we thought this project could support and enhance. As you may be able to hear or see behind me, we're about 10 meters from a major construction site. Today they're currently doing 20-meter piling by the looks of it, so hopefully it's not too noisy. But really what we wanted to avoid is exactly what you can see the other side of the fence in this photo, is that kind of dark abyss that you sometimes get with these long-term construction projects. You know, these are eight businesses that are trying to grow and establish themselves, and to be opposite a dead construction hoarding was just going to, for 4 years, this tenure was just going to really make that difficult. So this is where the sort of this A Street insurgent comes in. So really with the retailers already bringing a great food offer, our job was to look at what else high streets can bring, and the way we took that was to focus on the more social side of high streets and London's, you know, public spaces. You know, for us that's providing reason to wander, sort of curiosities to go and see, things that draw your attention. You know, it's about providing a vantage point for watching life. You know, there's kids playing in the Meadow. There's those people to my left right now having a very early lunch. Jealous in the sunshine. There's just people using this as a through route, and it's providing opportunities to meet, whether that's just in happenstance as we all sort of bump into people on the high street, or whether it's, you know, more group gatherings under some of these structures in some of these areas under the shelter. So the linear folly itself, to my left here, maybe take you on a little walk down later, is a mix of, you know, fun canopies, bits of event decking, micro parks, little nooks for people to sit in. It's a real myriad of spaces, some of them taken over by the public, some of them taken over by the 3 workspace shacks, which Rod will talk about in a bit, or taken over by the retailers that are the other side of the road, as we just mentioned. It's a real space for people to inhabit and use as they wish. The Meadow part to my right is a sort of a more generous space, a more playable landscape, and really space to be activated by people and pollinators. BD landscape architects who worked in great detail with Gary Grant, ecologist, really tailored the planting scheme to all seasons of pollinators, not just one honeybees, but really looking at how that could be reinforced year round, and, you know, worked with felled trees as part of the development to create habitats and play spaces and an undulating landscape with soil that was already in the area. So it was a real curation of what was already happening. A big part for us when we approach temporary structures is close attention to the long-term environmental impact, and an acknowledgement that in the tenure on this site is just 4 years. So that's why we use scaffolding, which can be, you know, deployed elsewhere or used to a future Lendlease meanwhile project, prolonging that design life. It's why the modules are designed to come apart in 2 pieces. They could be, you know, again, use meanwhile space, donated to a community group, you know, become a small classroom for a school. And the planting itself is, you know, is proposed to become part of permanent Lendlease green spaces, open spaces. The park behind me just opened recently, and when these spaces close down, there'll be opportunity to move things. Also with these modular systems, there's acknowledgement that high streets, as we've all experienced in the last 18 months, are fluctuating entities. Business model change, circumstances change like COVID, and spaces need to respond to that and keep a space active. And, you know, using scaffolding this way means we have that adaptability in this structure. There's also acknowledgement that, especially with food streets, there are 24-hour spaces, and we work closely with Michael Group Studio to create a really distinct lighting strategy for the area to keep the space active all day long. You know, and creating this is quite a unique space, and this distinctiveness is an asset to any high street. A unique character is, you know, what can draw people there and activate the space, you know, and shape experiences that are personal, create memories. And we get tagged in lots of photos of the elephant structures, of the mad folly behind me, and people just really enjoying the space. So really, just to reiterate, it was about creating, you know, a sustainable ecology of activation, not just, you know, resting on the fact that these restaurants could spill out into the forecourt, but really looking at what else we could add to that in terms of culture and leisure and experience. And I'll just pass on to Rada to how it's gone over the last year. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Gareth. Yes, on that point, I just wanted to make something kind of quite clear from the beginning. I mean, these projects were designed with our community in mind from the outset. This was not a requirement for our company to provide them, but it was something that we felt that we need to do in order to create a sense of place, a sense of belonging for our residents, for our retailers, for our visitors even, so they don't feel like they're part of a construction site. And as Gareth quite rightly pointed out, imagine if we left the hoarding line as it was supposed to be, without anything. Again, to the point that Gareth made earlier, in our free maker spaces on Sayers Street, we actually they're home to some of London's great, brilliant creatives and small businesses and startups, bringing to Sayers Street a community radio with Run Them Radio, a urban garden shop with a non-head gardener who has actually expanded further as well in another retail unit, which is on the corner of Haygate and Sayers Street, which is fantastic, of course. Thank you. And then also with Flat 70, which is an art studio gallery, which is brilliant. I just wanted to make sure to point out that although both of those projects were pre-COVID conceived, they were proven to be a great success during the pandemic, not only because Londoners have enjoyed outdoor spaces more than ever, but also because we have been able to support and keep our retailers operational by providing them additional spill-out area. And then finally, I just wanted to make the point that both of these areas are an extension to your own home. So this is why we call the structure at Sayers Street the living room at Sayers Street. On that note, I'm going to conclude and welcome any questions. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you both. Certainly a very vibrant project by the looks of the photographs. Hani, I know you visited the site. Do you want to come in first with your questions for Rada?
Yeah. Well, I visited based on obviously the application. Lighting was something that you kind of highlighted as a really big part of the kind of intervention, as you may call it. So yeah, I visited towards kind of the evening as the sun was setting to also get the sense of that. And the lighting is definitely a very strong part of the proposal. I definitely understand how that could be really useful. I also really enjoyed the heat lamps, just as a point. That was really valuable because it got quite cold that evening. In terms of, I have a couple of questions, but I'll keep them quite short because I know that we've got a few other questions to go through. I noticed that with Sayers Street, you have, I'm really bad with street names, but you have the end of Sayers Street, and then you have a main road that cuts across to the south of the street, and then you have, it continues out down into kind of like this other space with like, it's bookended by this orange building. Was that part of your site? Because it felt like a very natural transition to go across the street to that. And if that is, was there any desire to try and continue the structure along that to kind of extend out beyond the site, or?
Well, I'll crack on with this, Gareth. Hani, thank you very much for your question. The answer is yes, it is actually part of our site, but the key point was that because both of those buildings, which are on the other side, are actually, they have retail units at the bottom, and those are both, I think they're both residential actually. So the idea was that it was absolutely critical that we make both, it's also Sayers Street on that side, but it was absolutely critical to make the connection between the two. It is just that because it was supposed to be the 70 meters that are on the hoarding line for this building that is getting constructed right now, this was the only opportunity where we can basically deliver it. But it was from the beginning, it was important. You can see from the other angle that I showed in one of the images, this is why we actually lifted the hoarding as well a little bit, and the lights to actually bring attention from people that are coming from the other end to actually be able to come down and explore.
Yeah. I have another quick question, which I think, I apologize if Will or Pam, if you're going to ask this question, but it's mostly about what happens with the construction once it's finished. I know that you mentioned you're using scaffolding and materials that are modular in some way form that makes it easy, but are there any elements of this that, based on your kind of observations of how the spaces are being used, that might affect your kind of plans for what happens with the kind of high street as it gets developed, or how are you approaching that?
No, yeah, well, I think lesson learned from this last year, we would have done more sheltered seating if we'd known the pandemic had come in. You know, we designed a repetitive module, and I think if this high street was to be moved elsewhere, I'd probably suggest that those elements of outdoor shelter are extended and plugged into the structure. Certainly. I think that's definitely one thing we've learned from how the space is being used. And actually, a lot of the forecourts, even though when we originally conceived as, you know, more public nooks and seating spaces, in reality they were taken over by the businesses. The Nunhead Gardener used it as a display for their flowers. London Radio hosted a little sort of like event street party out of the forecourt. So I think that is another thing, you know, if we were to adapt this street and move it elsewhere, I'd probably focus on to heighten that sort of trader ownership even over the public space even more so.
And also, Hani, just to add on that, the other positive element is that obviously the future of this building, once it's completed behind us, at the bottom of it will be retail as well. So the idea is that the street will continue, but this is how we establish the beginning and making sure that the retailers on the opposite side feel supported. And again, the free maker spaces are modular, so they can be moved elsewhere to another, as Gareth pointed out, to another Lendlease development for another meanwhile use opportunity.
Yeah, they're also foundationless. It's quite interesting. Like the footings of them are only about a 60 millimeter concrete thing just to level the thing, and all the bracing. Why they're so tall, 6 meters high, all the bracings up top. So you can just lift them and plop them anywhere as long as you've got a bit of level ground. Which is, we worked with engineers HRW on that, which has made it actually viable.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'm going to bring in Will now because I know that you've also visited the project.
Yeah, firstly, love it that you're on site in the sunshine. I was down there yesterday having a meeting, so it's, you know, kind of.
Yeah, we won't be nice in that long, but we look.
But yeah, no, I'm a big fan of the sort of demountable modular system and kind of got a load of questions. But first, can I get three? Firstly, did you think about using this adaptable, flexible system as the COVID pandemic hit to reconsider how it was designed from the beginning, and then as COVID, you could easily kind of snap this between different configurations? And then to Lendlease, a couple of questions really. How do you see this kind of model of meanwhile activation becoming a kind of recognizable approach to your developments, and how will you capitalize on the modular buildings, the kind of componental parts? And then thirdly, how did you choose your tenants, your occupants? Are they reflective of the local area? I know a couple of them from other parts of Southeast London. And how do you work with them to potentially become permanent tenants in the final development? Do you assist them in business development, etc.?
Thank you, Will.
I can start with the first.
Go for it.
Yeah, so when the pandemic hit, actually, the main adaptation that we made when the pandemic hit, because actually it actually shut down the construction. It wasn't quite finished. The construction site shut down just about 2 weeks before completion. March last happened, and the one adaptation we made was actually the attachment of all the heating lamps to the scaffold, plugging into the scaffold structure. That wasn't part of our previous designs, but it was really simple and easy to suspend those from the hoarding from the scaffold and make it a warmer space going into the tough year ahead. There was a conversation around whether the canopies needed extending. In the end, we decided not to. Actually, all the shops have some awnings that stretch a way out. So there was a conversation about whether we needed to provide more shelter space, but in the end we kept it the same, but it would have certainly allowed for it. The way, in terms of sort of the longer narrative about meanwhile projects, to your second question, in development, this is actually the first time we've been involved in one halfway, and it's actually really, I think a lot of the time recently with meanwhile projects is one goes in and, you know, that's the meanwhile project. It delivers some of the developers' social value targets, and that's that. But I think what's been nice about what Lendlease have been doing is they're building a story from the artworks that came before, start with these small startups to going to them taking permanent spaces themselves, but still supporting it through meanwhile use. And ideally before that, there would have been a step before artworks, which was about using existing built fabric to support, in terms of sustainability, to support traders and businesses. And I think that's what really interests us about this project is the story from the beginning. And, you know, this is just what this this is just one part of that. And if at the end we result in a high street which is all local independent traders and not like a Tesco's, a Sainsbury's, and a Costa, as a lot of new high streets is. That's what we want to see to activate and create a local street. So I think that's a uniqueness for us. And Rada, if you want to talk about tenants.
No, thank you very much. Absolutely, Will. And another thing is, I just wanted to say that on the point about these structures going forward, I think even for Lendlease, I mean, we've been great ambassadors of Meanwhile Use, and it's something that we would like to continue because we see some of the benefit that is brought to this area. It's been fantastic. And in terms of supporting the tenants, so it's been absolutely critical and top priority for them, the majority of them, to be local. So from the 11 businesses that are currently we've opened on Sales Street at the moment, 8 of them are actually local and they're on affordable rents. So this is how we try to essentially support them and make sure that they can thrive within their new permanent locations. And I think it's inevitable that if we want to make these areas feel authentic and creating the real sense of place and belonging as what we're trying to create at Elephant Park, I think this is the way forward to try and really help those businesses thrive in an environment like this.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Will.
We're out of time, but just before we move on to the next presentation, are you able to turn around your camera so we can have
Yeah, so I think we've got some people having their lunch now, and just try and go above the boys. Do you want to stand up, Rada? I don't know if you can see.
Yeah, we can. That's great. Thank you.
And then the Meadow's this way.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. So next up, we're going to hear from Box on the Docks at MediaCityUK, which is presented by Josie Cahill of MediaCityUK and Wayne Hemingway of HemingwayDesign. This project is 30 sheds and greenhouses transformed by local artists as dining pods for restaurants to safely welcome people back. Take it away.
Hi, I wish I was in a shed or a greenhouse actually now at Media City. Instead of in my living room, that was a good idea. Just share my screen.
But you've got kids to think about.
I have.
And I've got grandkids to think about.
Okay, so I'm Josie. Thanks, Laura, Place Director at Media City UK. And just to sort of set a bit of context about Media City UK first, for those that don't know it. So Media City is a 200-acre mixed-use development on the banks of the Manchester Ship Canal, actually in Salford, in Greater Manchester. We've got a community of 8,000 workers, 2,000 residents, 10,000 students, and about 5 million annual visitors. We're the home to the BBC in the north. We've got about 10 television studios in Dock 10, ITV in Coronation Street, the Lowry Theatre, the University of Salford's postgraduate media departments, about 200 SMEs, as well as amenities such as restaurants, bars, cinemas, and hotels. And this year we're also celebrating our 10-year anniversary, so we've been operational for 10 years. I was appointed about 18 months ago, and I kicked off a project working with Wayne and HemingwayDesign around a renewed sort of place, brand and purpose for Media City for its next phase of development and its next decade. And actually that work was underway in earnest when the pandemic hit. And so we kind of pivoted and created Box on the Docks, which was sort of initially our pandemic response. But I think what it's done in terms of accelerating placemaking at Media City has been really interesting. Wayne, I don't know if you want to say anything else before we start to go through the slides.
Yeah, and from somebody coming fresh into obviously a new Media City, been there plenty of times, but coming in and working with them fresh, it was clear they were punching way under their weight. It's always felt a little bit colder than it should do. It never really felt like the destination that it could be, and maybe that was because of how diverse the site is in terms of the major stakeholders there. So you've got BBC, you've got ITV, you've got the University of Salford, you've got the brilliant Lowry, you've got the Imperial, Daniel Liebeskin's Imperial War Museum North. You've got right next to that Coronation Street. You've got these massive juxtapositions. Then you've got Man United football ground. You've got Lancashire County Cricket Club and an outlet centre. And then an outlet centre that's past its sell-by date. And all of this set on one of the most famous waterways, certainly in Europe, the Manchester Ship Canal, which had never really been animated at all. So yeah, it was things needed to happen.
Yeah, and so Box on the Docks, as you mentioned, this is just a quick site map to show you the sort of sheds and greenhouses kind of littered through the gardens, and we started with some on the waterfront. So we put 30 sheds and greenhouses there, but importantly, we worked with local artists. We brought in initially 15, but since then we've brought in further artists. We've worked with about 30 local artists now to decorate each shed and greenhouse. And then this is just a picture of them at Christmas, so you can see the sort of in situ in the gardens. And really, the original.
Can I just say that?
Sure.
Just go back to that picture. And that was delivered. That was delivered. The first phase of this was delivered for £100,000, which is really, really cost effective.
Yeah. So the original purpose was for us to sort of safely reopen Media City as a destination and to build confidence for people to come back, both to visit and workers. We really wanted to support our local hospitality industry as well as local creatives at a time when they needed it most. And it was absolutely a partnership project. So we worked not only with HemingwayDesign, but we worked with the BBC and BBC Sounds on it, all the local artists that we work with and the restaurants. And we really also wanted it to support local charities. So we worked with the Salford Food Bank and Manchester Street Poem, which was a homeless charity. And importantly, the name Box on the Docks, all the research that we've done on the place brand talked about the importance of heritage of the docks. So the name was really important in kind of rooting it in that heritage of the ship canal and connecting local people to it. And we did make one of the greenhouses was covered with pictures of the old dock work as an explanation of the name. So to give it that sense of place. And initially we turned it around really quickly. So we installed 30 greenhouses and sheds. We commissioned originally 15 local artists, developed the brand and partnered, as I've touched on, and launched a sort of great national and local press initially last summer. Since then we've moved it and did Christmas activation with markets, and we're currently doing kind of residency model this summer. So it's had life after its kind of initial summer as the pandemic response, which has been great. So as I touched on, supporting local artists, we focus mainly on Salford artists and Salford studios, just to make sure it did feel very rooted in Salford, and they all got the chance to be involved.
This was at a time when there was no help for artists, and we thought about a way of making sure that we could, initially it was 15, then it became 30 artists, and all of them were paid, a decent chunk, and that was included within that 100,000 as well. So yeah, the biggest chunk of money actually went to local artists who were practicing in Salford, and that was the biggest chunk. That was the biggest chunk of the money at a time when they really needed it.
Yeah, and the hospitality was also really important. So we're really chuffed to say that none of our restaurants closed down as part of the pandemic, and actually they reported between 20 to 30% increased trade as a result of being able to use the boxes. And there was no charge on any of this, by the way. They didn't pay any rent at all on these boxes. It was just a way to kind of get them trading again and get people back out of Media City.
And the only other way for the restaurants would have been to have tables outside. And I know that most of the judges are in London, and it's a big difference when you're in a windswept northern Manchester, in big open spaces in the rainiest city in the UK.
So it is sunny today. Sorry, it's sunny today.
Yeah, but I know it's sunny some days. I'm from there, but these restaurants almost certainly would not have been able to operate on many days without these.
Yeah, and it provided something unique and fun to do as well. And the charity element, so we transformed one of the sheds into a food bank collection box for the Salford Food Bank. And we've collected nearly 2 tons of food for them overall, and we did a kind of PR campaign on that. Then the other picture is the homeless charity I mentioned, Manchester Street Poem, and we created a soundtrack actually with the band Underworld, who they kind of originally did a commission for Manchester International Festival with. We created a soundtrack for that box. It was quite immersive, and they brought down the people that are in their collective to sort of work on that box, which was a great experience. Do you want to pick up Wayne here?
Yeah, and it just became the place to visit. And I think the other important thing about it is that all of it was made again by local people. So the sheds themselves were manufactured in a local factory, Everything, absolutely everything was local. And the things like, wedding, it started to become a wedding venue, which was fantastic. People, it was the only way of having weddings. The social media and PR is just phenomenal. I don't think I've ever, we've done some pretty big stuff in our career, but to get, they gain 10,000 followers on social media, in the space of less than a year. It's just phenomenal. Is that? Yeah, keep going, and keep going. We can go past all of this, unless you want to say anything.
Yeah, just I guess that it was really visually exciting. So we got lots of engagement from people coming down, taking photos themselves and posting them on Instagram, and we were able to repost them. So it felt like everyone had a kind of piece of the pie of the project really as well. And we were really pleased.
Yeah, that press, 185 pieces of press coverage, it's just paid itself back in so many ways, financially and everything. It's been, that it's serious.
Yeah, and the press we got was different to before. Like, we have got a lot of property press before, and we were really keen to take it from that feeling like a property development into a place, and to get that kind of consumer press and stuff in creative review and things, sort of for me, kind of up the ante on the type of engagement we were getting with Media City. It doubled footfall from the beginning of the pandemic starting. So we doubled the amount of visitors brought to Media City. And we attribute a lot of that to Box on the Docks because the offices weren't open yet, and that pattern's continued. So we now seen a complete inversion of the footfall at Media City. So
we had 1 minute left.
I think it's worth saying that BBC had 4,000 people working in there, but then went down to 400. And they were the biggest footfall. So with 10% of the people working there, we doubled the footfall.
Yeah. And so just quickly on the impact, all the restaurants stayed open, and we've since had a lot of new independents move in, and we supported the artists and we collected the food bank, and we feel like we started this new kind of like softened our spaces and working with the artists created this more human scale type of placemaking, which we're continuing now. And I'll just flick through Wayne if you want to say anything.
Keep going through. It photographs really well. Everybody just kept turning up and doing stuff there as they do now.
These were Christmas markets.
Yeah, it's become a place for young creatives to sell stuff. And we'll finish on that one, which the Manchester Evening News did, Cox on the Docks. If you look down just under his jacket, it's the best picture of just under the hem of his jacket, it's the best picture of the whole campaign. Not planned at all. Not everybody.
It really wasn't planned. I didn't even spot it. We sent it to the Evening News, in fact, and then the artist contacted me. So there you go.
There you have it, Cox on the Docks.
It's a very joyful project from start to finish.
Thank you very much. I'm going to bring in the judges now to ask you some questions. So Pam, do you want to come in first? Because I know you've actually been to the docks.
Yeah, I have. Hi. Manchester accent, but I'm in the other settled city, Birmingham. So, I went twice actually. In the last 3 weeks, I've been twice, both beautifully sunny days as well. I just wondered what were your plans about maintaining the momentum, access, and sort of standards when it isn't used by food establishments? Because obviously, this sort of it's almost a season of when the pop-ups were coming and opening, and then there was the bits in between. I just wonder how you maintain that sort of the presentation and the standards so it's accessible to people who don't want to buy any food or drink, perhaps.
So do you mean like what we're doing with it now, or how?
I think the legacy of it.
Yeah,
the
in-between bit, because you had the Christmas market, and then when I was there, everything was about to reopen in early July. So I just wondered how you maintain it as an accessible place in between those sort of highlights.
So when we commissioned the Christmas artist, for example, we were really keen that all the art, it could double as a piece of public art really as well. And we kind of advertised it like that and said, whether you can come down and, because we didn't know if they were going to be able to open, and actually in the end they couldn't. But we then sort of put together an art trail and we developed a PDF which we put on the website, and we said to people, you can't go in an art gallery at the minute, but you can come down to Media City and grab a coffee and wander around the public art trails. It was intended to have that dual purpose. And this summer we're also, we've reopened again now. We're actually doing an activation on the piazza where we're drawing, working with artists again to draw sort of picnic spaces and stuff. So we can say to people, if you can't afford to come and eat out in the, we wouldn't say it like that, but if you've not got a budget to eat there, you can bring your own picnic to Media City and come and look at artworks on the sheds and greenhouses still. And actually, the atmosphere it creates just to sit on a picnic bench around outside them is really nice as well. So they have just softened that whole space and made it feel kind of more accessible, and the spaces to kind of dwell in between.
Thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to bring in Hani now. Do you want to ask a question to Wayne and Josie?
I think, I mean, I really like the presentation. I like the kind of the fact that you developed a brand alongside the actual site. It's quite good to see that. I think that from my memories of going to Salford, I do remember it kind of always being a little bit sort of cold. It felt it was a really nice place to be, but there was always that kind of that wide space, which has now got that space. So I think it's really good. I was going to ask a very similar question to Pamela, which is sort of thinking about, okay, how do you, what does it mean for people? Because these are very contained spaces. So what does it mean for you if you're not like buy lunch, or if you're just looking for somewhere to sit? So you've kind of already answered that question. And I don't know. I'm trying to think of any other questions, but I'm drawing a blank on this one. So maybe come back to me at the end. I'll try to think of another question.
No, and also just to say, with the public art element, we've also installed things like a flower wall that with branded box on the dots. We encourage people to come and sit up and take photos with, and we encourage, there's the CBeebies box, for example, which isn't a dining box, which you can have your photo taken outside of, or there's little games on the outside. So we've sort of tried to include kind of experiential stuff as well as dining pods increasingly, so that it is accessible.
Thanks. And Will, I'll bring you in as the kind of final question to Wayne and Josie.
Cool. Hi, Josie. Hi, Wayne. Thanks for the presentation. It's really interesting. I guess I'm going to look past this and go, where are the sheds going? What, in my mind, they could be mini Media City outposts that sort of percolate into the surrounding communities, and they've then got a continued relationship as your program evolves, and then they've also got a recognizable identity, because for some, I guess, Media City is quite this grand space. It's a big arts community, and do they feel welcome? And if you started to maybe place them within the wider sort of Manchester community, they feel a sort of ongoing relationship and have a hub within their space. And I wonder if that's something you've considered, as how these sort of micro hubs can kind of be reused or evolve.
I think at the moment they've still got a very valid life, and it's created a brand that that Media City didn't have before. So there's lots of places that are known for something that is on a human scale. Now it's got something that's on a human scale. So I think at the moment we should keep mining that and keep it going. And they can be perfect as market stores. They can be perfect as pop-up bars. There's all sorts of things to encourage entrepreneurial activity, which it never really had. It obviously had massive entrepreneurs in Media City, but it never felt like a place where startups. And here now you've got something. But then the other thing to remember is, anybody who's got a garden shed knows that they have a lifespan anyway. These are only, these are a few £100, and the greenhouses were bought off the shelf from
Bolton. No, supplier in Bolton, yeah.
Yeah, so they're not, this was done without, it was done so cost effectively that I think, yes, we totally agree, it'd be brilliant to do the things that you're suggesting, but I would imagine that the life of those buildings will, because they're only meant to be, they're meant to stick in somebody's garden and not have thousands of people dealing with them. The chairs and tables were gifted. Everything was done so that it was to be temporary, but it's brilliant that it's actually lasted this long and has probably got another year or two as it is.
Okay, so perhaps then, building on what you're saying, how do you introduce this sort of human scale, these incubator hubs or pods within the kind of more permanent?
Well, I think what we were on a long call yesterday with the senior people at Media City and Peel who own that, and this is changing hearts and minds. Peel were never, I can be hard about this, harder than Josie can be. Peel and Media City were never an Argent or a King's Cross type thing or a Lendlease or any of that. They hadn't done any of this before. Placemaking wasn't something that high up the agenda now. We're having amazing discussions with them about the future, and how to become, what you're suggesting, and that is, have more human scale, and just be not just about BBC, ITV, but be about somebody who wants to start doing something very, very small, and in 50 years might be the next BBC or ITV.
Cool.
Yeah, and so there is absolutely an appetite now and an ambition for Box on the Docks to sort of grow and have a permanent home. So that's absolutely what we're looking at. That kind of answers the question as well. And it's taken that meanwhile you to sort of change those hearts and minds, but it's been really brilliant project in that way. So absolutely, it's got a life beyond the sheds and greenhouses as something that supports independence.
When you do a place brand for somewhere, they often just sit in a drawer. People just do it because they feel they have to do. But a place brand is all about the actions, and this was the first action straight away. And because it's worked so well now, they're actually going to live the values that they're not just stated. We do this and we do that, and then they put the place brand in the drawer. They've proved that if they live it, it works. The footfall, the media, everything. So it's completely validated the place brand and completely changed hearts and minds in a very big corporation.
Great. Yeah, so it's show and tell, really. It's a test bed, and it's proved concept to those who might have been a bit more risk averse. So it's really interesting to see that as a model going forward.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks to all our presenters today, and to all our judges. It's been a really great kind of morning of really different, varied presentations, all kind of with a look at the pandemic and kind of how that's impacted how we do meanwhile, and kind of how we activate spaces in a kind of changing world where factors are constantly changing. So we're now going to kind of wrap up, and our judges are going to go on to make their deliberations. The winner will be announced in the awards ceremony, which starts at 3 p.m. this afternoon. We'll be back with a lunchtime talk with Peter Barber at 1 p.m. Peter is an award-winning architect, and he'll be talking about designing houses without pour doors. So please join us again at 1 or join us at 3 p.m. to hear who's won this award. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.